My daughter called me staff at her own wedding and pretended we'd never met. Her rich in-laws mocked my outfit. I let them finish humiliating me before quietly taking the microphone and making one announcement. Their faces went pale. My own daughter looked me straight in the eye and said, "Excuse me, but the staff entrance is in the back." I watched her face, not a flicker of recognition. As the guests turned to stare at the woman in the cheap Target dress, the mother she had just disowned in front of Boston's elite. I was holding a gift I'd spent 3 months saving for. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Standing there on that marble floor, I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart that had been breaking slowly for 2 years, but the last fragile thread of hope finally snapping in half. You'd think that after raising a child for 29 years, through sleepless nights, scraped knees, and teenage heartbreak, you'd earn at least a moment of recognition at her wedding. But here's the thing about rich people, they have a way of making you disappear. While you're standing right in front of them, the woman next to Melissa, Bradley's mother, Patricia Thornton, actually laughed. A delicate little sound like crystal shattering. "Oh, darling," she said to my daughter, "your staff really should know better than to use the front entrance." I looked down at my navy dress, the nicest thing I owned, bought specifically for this day. At 63, I'd learned to live off clearance racks and make every dollar stretch. 3 months of overtime at the insurance office had paid for that dress, the gift, and the gas to drive here from Hartford. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. My voice somehow steadied despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "I must have made a mistake." The security guard started walking toward me. A kind-faced man in his 50s, probably with daughters of his own. "Ma'am, if you could just..." "Of course," I interrupted. "No scene, not here. Not in front of these people who already thought I was nothing." I turned to leave. But not before I saw Melissa's face. For just 1 second, a shadow crossed her expression. She knew exactly who I was. She knew, and she chose to pretend otherwise. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding or confusion about my appearance. The truth is, the story of how my daughter became a stranger started 18 months earlier. The day she brought Bradley Thornton home for the first time. I should have seen the warning signs then. But love makes you blind to a lot of things, especially a mother's love. "Mom, this is Bradley," Melissa had said, her voice sounding different somehow. Cooler, more careful, like she was auditioning for a role in a play I hadn't read the script for. Bradley was handsome in that expensive kind of way. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, and a perfect handshake that lasted exactly 3 seconds. "Mrs. Williams," he'd said, "Melissa has told me so much about you." What he really meant was, she'd told him enough to know I was a problem to be managed. I'd spent all afternoon cooking that dinner, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans from my garden. The same meal I'd made for every birthday and celebration in Melissa's life. The same meal she used to beg for when she was 8 and homesick at summer camp. Bradley picked at his food like he was afraid it might contaminate his trust fund. "This is very authentic," he'd said. That word, authentic, like I was some kind of museum exhibit. Melissa barely ate either. She just watched Bradley's reaction to everything. The chipped dinner plates I'd had since her childhood, the discount store tablecloth, the framed photos from our family trips to state parks and budget motels. "Mom still has that picture from when I was 10, she'd said, laughing in a way that sounded almost like an apology. "At the Grand Canyon, how quaint." Patricia Thornton had replied a month later when she came to visit. She said it the same way someone might say, "How tragic." That was the beginning of the end. Though I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was watching my daughter fall in love. But what I was really watching was her fall away from me, one perfectly manicured step at a time. Let me tell you about the real moment I should have known I was losing her. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was sitting at my kitchen table, grading insurance claims, the same table where I'd helped Melissa with her homework for 12 years, when her name lit up my phone screen. "Mom, we need to talk." Not "Hi, Mom," not "How was your day?" Just that flat, business-like tone she'd been using more and more ever since Bradley came into the picture. "Of course, honey," I said. "What's on your mind?" There was a pause. I could hear voices in the background, expensive voices, talking about wine vintages and stock portfolios. She was at the Thornton house again. "It's about the wedding planning," she said. "We've been thinking about the guest list and, well, some adjustments need to be made." "Adjustments?" I set down my pen and gave her my full attention. "What kind of adjustments?" "Nothing major," she said quickly. "It's just that Bradley's family has certain expectations about the tone of the event. Very formal, very traditional." I waited. 40 years of being a single mother teaches you when to push and when to let silence do the work. "The thing is, Mom," she continued, "your friends from work and the neighborhood might not be comfortable in that environment. It's going to be very upscale. Very different from what they're used to. There it was, the knife sliding in smooth and clean. I see, I said slowly. And what about your godmother, Linda? Or your cousin Patty, the one who drove 12 hours to help us move you to college? This isn't personal, Mom, it's practical. We just want everyone to feel comfortable. As if my family and friends were some kind of embarrassment that needed to be hidden away. How many of my guests are we talking about removing, Melissa? Another pause. Longer this time, well. We've reserved 3 seats for your side. You, Aunt Carol, and maybe Mrs. Patterson from next door since she helped raise me, 3 seats. 3 seats for the woman who'd raised her alone after her father died when she was 7. 3 seats for the family that had loved her unconditionally for 29 years, I understand. I said, though I didn't, not really, you're upset, she said, I'm processing, I replied, that night. I sat in my living room, looking at the photo albums spread across my coffee table. Every birthday party I'd thrown with dollar store decorations and homemade cake. Every school play I'd attended alone while the other parents sat together in couples. Every sacrifice I'd made to give her a good life, apparently. None of that was good enough for the Thorntons of Boston. Meeting the Thornton family in their natural habitat felt like being dropped into a nature documentary about a species I'd only read about. Their Beacon Hill mansion, and yes, they called it a mansion, not a house, had more square footage than my entire neighborhood. Patricia Thornton greeted me at the door wearing pearls the size of grapes, and a smile that never reached her eyes. Dorothy, how lovely to finally meet you properly. She said my name like it was something she'd found stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Please call me Dot, I offered. Everyone does. Oh, I couldn't possibly, she said. Names have such importance, don't you think? They say so much about background. Bradley's father, Harrison Thornton III, because apparently just being Harrison Thornton II wasn't impressive enough, barely looked up from his Wall Street Journal when we were introduced. The man had mastered the art of making you feel invisible while you were standing right in front of him. Melissa tells us you work in insurance, Patricia said as she led me through rooms that looked like museum exhibits. How practical. The way she said practical made it sound like a contagious disease. Claims adjustment, I clarified. I help people rebuild their lives after disasters. How noble, she murmured, steering me past oil paintings that probably cost more than my annual salary. The real fun started at dinner. They'd arranged the seating so I was placed between Bradley's great-aunt Constance, who was 90 and mostly deaf, and his cousin Trevor, who was 35 and mostly drunk. So, Dorothy, Harrison said over the soup course. Melissa mentioned you raised her alone. That must have been quite challenging. The word challenging hung in the air like smoke from a fire. They were politely pretending not to smell. It had its moments, I replied, but we managed just fine. I said, oh, I'm sure you did your best. Patricia added, smiling that same polished smile again. Single motherhood is so common these days. Though, of course, children do benefit from having proper guidance. Trevor snorted into his wine. Mother means money, Dorothy. Children benefit from having money. Even Melissa looked uncomfortable then. But she didn't say anything. That silence said more than any words ever could. Fortunately, Harrison continued. Bradley can provide the stability that's been lacking. That's when I finally understood. This wasn't just about money or social class. This was about erasing me entirely. Replacing 29 years of love and sacrifice with their idea of what a proper family should look like. But they weren't done with me yet. The morning of the wedding arrived gray and drizzling, which somehow felt fitting for what was about to become the worst day of my life. I'd woken up at 5 a.m. with stomach cramps that had nothing to do with the toast I couldn't force myself to eat. My navy dress hung on the closet door like a flag of surrender. 3 months of overtime for a dress that probably cost less than what Patricia spent on lunch. But it was clean, pressed, and dignified. It was the best I could do. The Brookfield Country Club was everything I'd expected. All marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and staff who could spot someone who didn't belong from 50 yards away. I parked my 12-year-old Honda between a Mercedes and a BMW, feeling like I was contaminating the parking lot just by being there. Inside, the lobby buzzed with pre-wedding excitement. Women in designer dresses, the kind that cost more than my monthly rent, kissed the air near each other's cheeks. Men in $1,000 suits chatted about golf handicaps and market portfolios. I stood near the gift table, clutching my present, a hand-carved jewelry box I'd found in an antique shop in Hartford. The wood was maple, warm and golden, with tiny roses etched into the lid. I'd spent weeks searching for something that felt special enough for my daughter's wedding day. Oh my, I heard Patricia's voice before I saw her. She was speaking to a cluster of women, her words carrying just far enough for me to hear. Such an interesting mix of guests today. Melissa has such a generous heart, including everyone. The way she said everyone made it painfully clear exactly who she meant. I pretended to study the gift table, reading the name tags on the elaborately wrapped packages from Tiffany and Cartier. My little antique jewelry box looked modest beside them, but it was chosen with love. And that had to count for something. That's when Melissa appeared, floating down the marble staircase in her wedding dress. Like something out of a fairy tale. She was beautiful. My baby girl, all grown up, radiant with happiness. For a moment, my heart swelled with pride and love. This was my daughter. The little girl I'd rocked to sleep every night. The teenager I'd helped through heartbreak. The young woman I'd cheered for at her college graduation. Then she saw me. And that's when I watched my daughter's face go completely blank, like someone had just erased every memory of the woman who'd raised her. The woman who was about to pretend she'd never seen me before in her life. The transformation was subtle but complete. I watched her posture shift, her chin lifted slightly, her eyes gliding right past me like I was part of the wallpaper. She'd practiced this moment. That's when I realized this wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was calculated. Melissa, darling. Patricia appeared at her side, air-kissing her new daughter-in-law. You look absolutely radiant. Everyone is so excited to meet you. They moved through the crowd like royalty. Accepting congratulations and compliments, I stayed by the gift table, still holding my present. Watching my daughter charm people who wouldn't have given me the time of day. Ma'am. A young server appeared at my elbow. The ceremony is about to begin. Would you like me to show you to your seat? Yes, please, I said quietly. She led me through the crowd, past clusters of Thornton family and friends, toward the back of the room. My seat was in the last row, behind a pillar that partially blocked the view of the altar. Row after row of Thorntons and their society friends filled the front section. 3 chairs in the back corner held the entirety of my side of the family, me, my sister Carol, who'd driven down from Vermont, and Mrs. Patterson from next door, the woman who'd helped raise Melissa. Patterson, my elderly neighbor who'd practically helped raise Melissa, sat down on my other side. Well, Carol whispered, settling beside me, this is cozy, leave it to my sister to find humor in humiliation. She took in the scene with the sharp, assessing eye of a woman who'd spent 40 years teaching middle school. Did you see the gift table? She asked quietly. There's a present there from the governor of Massachusetts, really? I whispered back, really. Also one from some British lord whose name I can't even pronounce. The string quartet began to play, and everyone rose as the processional started. Bridesmaids in matching pink dresses glided down the aisle, followed by the flower girl, Bradley's niece, a tiny blonde thing scattering rose petals like she was blessing the ground. Then came Melissa. She was walking alone down the aisle. Her father had died when she was 7, and I'd always assumed that meant she'd walk alone in his memory, or maybe, somehow, I would walk with her. But apparently, Harrison Thornton III had offered to escort her, and she'd accepted. She'd chosen her new father-in-law over the mother who'd raised her alone. As she passed our row, I caught her eye for the briefest moment. There was something there, a flicker of recognition, maybe even regret, but it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. The ceremony itself was beautiful and cold, filled with readings about tradition and family legacy, all words that felt like they were written to remind me I didn't belong there. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the marriage, a nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. I stayed silent, of course, but for a moment I wondered what would happen if I stood up and said, I object to my daughter, pretending I don't exist. Instead, I sat quietly and watched her promise to love and honor a man whose family had spent the last 6 months systematically erasing me from her life. And then it was done. They were married. Time for the reception, and that's when the real humiliation began. The cocktail hour was where the Thornton family truly showed their teeth. I'd barely stepped into the reception area when a woman in a silver dress, wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country, approached me with a smile that could freeze. Champagne, you must be Dorothy, she said. Though we'd never been introduced. Word travels fast in rich people circles. Apparently, I'm Vivian Ashworth, she continued brightly. Patricia's sister. I understand you're helping with the service today. Helping with the service? Not the mother of the bride. Not even a guest. She actually thought I was working the wedding. Actually, I'm wonderful. She interrupted, pressing an empty champagne flute into my hand. Could you be a dear and get me another? The Dom Perignon, not the regular champagne. I can tell the difference. I stood there holding her glass like an idiot as she fluttered away to rejoin her cluster of society friends. Around me, the reception buzzed with laughter and chatter. Crystal glasses clinked. Designer heels clicked across marble floors. And nobody seemed to notice that the mother of the bride was being treated like the help. Well, almost nobody. Ma'am? A real server appeared beside me. A college-aged girl with kind eyes and the weary look of someone working 3 jobs. To pay for school, are you okay? You look a little lost. Just finding my bearings, I said quietly, setting the champagne flute down on a nearby table decorated with white orchids. That probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The server glanced around nervously, making sure her supervisor wasn't watching. I don't mean to be rude, she said softly, but my supervisor mentioned there might be some confusion about staff today. Are you supposed to be working this event? Even the actual staff could tell I didn't belong with the guests. That's when the full weight of my daughter's betrayal hit me like a freight train loaded with pure humiliation. She hadn't just excluded my friends and family from her wedding. She'd arranged things so that I would be mistaken for the help. The woman I had raised alone. The girl I'd put through college while working 2 jobs. The daughter I'd loved unconditionally for 29 years. Had orchestrated my public humiliation down to the smallest detail. No, honey, I said gently, my voice somehow steadier than I felt. I'm not working. I'm the bride's mother. The girl's eyes went wide with horror. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Mrs. Thornton told us all the family was seated at the head table. So when I saw you back here, she trailed off, realizing she was only making it worse. Mrs. Thornton. My daughter, she was already Mrs. Thornton now, and she'd made sure everyone knew exactly which family mattered. The ones worth acknowledging sat up front in their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, basking in the glow of wealth and approval. It's not your fault, I told the young server softly. It seems like there's been some miscommunication today. That was putting it mildly. What had happened today wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a full-on character assassination. Then I spotted Melissa across the room. She was laughing at something Bradley whispered in her ear, radiant, carefree, completely unbothered by the fact that she had just erased the woman who gave her life. Her dress probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and she wore it like armor, a barrier between her new world and the one she came from. But as I watched her move effortlessly through that glittering crowd of sharks in couture, I realized I had underestimated her. Every slight, every accidental exclusion, every cut to the guest list. None of it had been random. She'd been planning this for months. Every move had led to this moment, me standing invisible in the corner, while she began her new life as if she'd never had a mother at all. The worst part? She was good at it. My sweet little girl, the one who used to cry when she stepped on ants, had become someone who could strip another person of their dignity without even blinking. But she'd forgotten one very important thing. The woman who raised her didn't give up easily. I'd been dealing with people who thought they were smarter than me for 40 years. Dinner was announced with the kind of fanfare reserved for royalty. The head table gleamed with gold-rimmed china and crystal that probably cost more than my car. Melissa sat there like a princess holding court, accepting congratulations from people who looked at her as if she'd done something heroic, like she'd married into money instead of solving world hunger. I found my assigned seat at a small table tucked behind a massive potted palm in the farthest corner of the room. It was so far back, it practically had its own zip code. My table mates were an odd little collection of the overlooked and unimportant, the florist, the photographer's assistant, 2 elderly cousins who'd apparently been deemed too embarrassing for prime seating, and a young woman whose date had abandoned her for better company. Well, this is cozy, Cousin Eleanor muttered, adjusting her hearing aid and squinting toward the head table. I haven't been stuck at the reject table since your Uncle Fred's second wedding. At least then they gave us dinner rolls. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was sitting with the only people in the room who had actually contributed something real to this wedding: the flowers, the photographs, the memories. Meanwhile, the people at the head table had done nothing but bring their fat checkbooks and their disdain for anyone who worked for a living. Then Harrison Thornton III stood to make the first toast. He tapped his crystal glass with a sterling silver knife that probably cost more than my rent. Today, he began in that polished, practiced tone of his. We celebrate not just a marriage, but the joining of 2 families who share the same values and traditions. Bradley and Melissa represent the best of what young people can achieve when they are raised with proper guidance and support, shared values. I nearly choked on my water. What values, exactly? The belief that money outranks loyalty? That love can be bought with the right venue and enough champagne? That inconvenient people like mothers who work 2 jobs to raise their children simply don't exist? Proper guidance. Apparently, 29 years of single motherhood didn't qualify. The late nights spent helping with homework, the soccer games I cheered from the sidelines alone, the sacrifices I made so she could have a better life. None of that mattered in Harrison Thornton's world. He went on, his speech full of words like tradition and legacy. Elegant phrases that sounded lovely but meant nothing once you stripped away the gloss. The guests nodded approvingly, sipping their expensive wine, probably calculating the cost of the floral arrangements as they listened. The photographer drifted between tables, capturing moments of laughter and love, snapshots of a perfect wedding built on polite cruelty and polished lies. When the photographer reached my table, she paused and frowned, glancing down at her clipboard. "Excuse me, are you Dorothy Williams?" "Yes," I said. "The bride's mother, that's what I thought," she replied, still looking puzzled. She glanced from her notes to the head table, where the official family sat smiling beneath chandeliers. "It's just, I was told by the wedding planner that there wouldn't be any family photos from the bride's side. Only the Thornton family portraits, no family photos." My daughter had made sure her wedding album would show no trace of me, as if I'd never existed. Future generations of Thorntons would one day flip through those glossy pages and see a perfect family, never knowing that the bride had been raised by a woman who worked 2 jobs, sacrificed everything, and loved her enough to make sure she had every opportunity in life. "I see," I said evenly, though I felt something cold and sharp settle deep in my chest. "Well, perhaps you could take one quick photo of our table for the record." The photographer gave me a sympathetic smile and lifted her camera. As the flash went off, I couldn't help thinking about all the moments that wouldn't be captured today. The mother-daughter photos while getting ready, the teary smile as I helped her into her gown, the traditional portraits showing 3 generations of women, the dance where I'd have told her how proud I was. Melissa had choreographed my disappearance with surgical precision. In her version of history, she hadn't had a mother at all. Maybe she'd been raised by wolves or just appeared one day, fully formed from pure ambition. But here's what my daughter didn't know about me. 40 years of working as an insurance claims adjuster teaches you how to notice when things don't add up. And something about this entire situation smelled like more than just snobbery. It felt like a cover-up. During the band's break, I excused myself to use the restroom, but I took a little detour. Past the elegant Carters, I spotted the club's business office, door slightly ajar, likely left open in the rush of the evening. I paused, telling myself it was just professional curiosity. But after decades of chasing paper trails that led to ugly truths, I knew when something wasn't right. From inside, I heard familiar voices, and they were not talking about wedding cake. "It's absolutely crucial that there's no connection visible to anyone looking from the outside," Harrison was saying, his voice clipped and anxious. "The SEC investigation is still ongoing, and they're specifically looking for patterns in our social circle." I froze. "SEC investigation?" My pulse pounded in my ears as I pressed myself against the wall. "Daddy, you're being paranoid," Bradley said, though there was a tremor in his confidence. "Nobody's going to trace anything back to the family trust. The shell companies are clean. The guest list alone would raise questions if anyone looked closely enough," Harrison replied sharply. "That's why we needed to keep certain people away from this event. People with the wrong kind of professional background." My blood ran cold. This wasn't about social class or embarrassment. This was about something far bigger and far more dangerous. "What about Dorothy?" Patricia's voice cut through the air, laced with panic. "She could be a real problem if she starts asking the right questions. Her job makes her exactly the kind of person we can't have sniffing around." "She won't be a problem," came Melissa's voice, calm, deliberate, and utterly foreign to me. "Trust me." "Mother," she said, "I know exactly how to handle her. She's so desperate for my approval, she'll believe whatever I tell her." "Mother." She'd called Patricia Thornton mother, the same word she used to call me, now handed over like a family heirloom to a womanhood. Bought her loyalty with money and status, and she'd spoken about me like I was a stray dog that needed to be kept. "Quiet, good," Harrison said next, his tone cool and calculating. "The less she knows about Bradley's business arrangements, the better for everyone involved." A claims adjuster with her experience would recognize financial irregularities immediately if she saw the right documents, and that's when it all clicked, piece by piece. Like tumblers in a lock. My job wasn't just embarrassing to them. It was dangerous. I wasn't excluded because I was poor or uncultured. I was excluded because I was the one person in that entire room capable of uncovering what they were hiding. I'd spent 20 years investigating insurance fraud, following complex paper trails, connecting dots others missed, and building airtight cases that sent more than a few smug criminals to federal prison. And now, it seemed the Thornton family had a few dots of their own. They desperately didn't want someone with my particular skill set connecting. I slipped quietly away from the door and returned to my table, my heart pounding as my mind raced through the implications. What kind of SEC investigation involved wedding guest lists? What kind of business arrangements needed shell companies? And why was my daughter so confident she could manipulate me into staying silent about whatever illegal mess her new family was tangled in? The band returned from their break, and the MC announced the traditional father-daughter dance. I watched as Harrison escorted Melissa onto the dance floor, the guests murmuring in admiration. Cameras flashing to capture the touching moment, she looked up at him with that same tender, adoring expression she used to reserve for me back when I was still the most important person in her world. As they swayed to the opening notes of My Girl, the very song I used to sing softly to her when thunderstorms scared her as a child, the realization hit me like a gut punch. This wedding wasn't just about joining two families. It was about erasing everything that didn't fit neatly into the Thornton family's perfect facade, including me. But they'd made one fatal miscalculation. They assumed a working-class woman from Hartford would be too intimidated by their wealth, their power, and their condescending smiles to fight back. Clearly, they'd never met a woman who'd raised a daughter alone while working full-time and going to night school, who'd built a career taking down white-collar criminals who thought they were too clever to get caught. It was time to show them what proper guidance really looked like. The perfect opportunity came during the cake-cutting ceremony. Everyone's attention was glued to the gleaming four-tiered confection, a masterpiece of vanilla fondant and sugar roses that probably cost more than my yearly mortgage. I quietly approached the bandleader during a lull in the applause. "Excuse me," I said politely, showing him my driver's license. "I'm Dorothy Williams, the bride's mother. I'd like to make a brief announcement after the cake ceremony, if that's possible." He blinked in confusion. Understandable, given that nobody in the entire planning process had apparently mentioned that the bride had a mother. But after a moment, he nodded respectfully. "Of course, ma'am. Just give me your signal when you're ready." I returned to my small, hidden table and watched Melissa feed cake to her new husband, while cameras flashed from every angle. She was radiant, glowing with the smug happiness of someone who believed her life had fallen perfectly into place. For a fleeting second, my heart ached. She looked so much like the little girl who used to stand on a kitchen chair beside me, helping bake cookies for her school fundraisers, carefully measuring flour, sneaking chocolate chips, laughing when I pretended not to notice. But that little girl was gone, replaced by a woman who'd chosen status and wealth over the mother who had sacrificed everything for her. What Melissa didn't realize was that while the Thorntons were busy congratulating themselves on their flawless deception and celebrating their sanitized version of family unity, I'd been doing what I do best: investigating irregularities and building a case. During my trip to the restroom and my detour past the business office, I hadn't just eavesdropped. I'd taken photos, several clear, incriminating photos of documents carelessly left on Harrison Thornton's polished mahogany desk. Insurance claims, 3 different companies, all signed by Bradley Thornton, in his distinctive, confident handwriting, each one filed for property damage from accidents that occurred at just the right time, always conveniently before major financial deadlines. There was the boat fire, 2 days before a business loan payment was due. The car accident that totaled his BMW exactly when his credit cards hit their limit. The apartment flood that somehow happened just before he needed money for Melissa's engagement ring. Each incident perfectly timed, each claim just large enough to patch the hole in his finances. 20 years of investigating fraud had trained my instincts to spot patterns that innocent people would dismiss as bad luck, and Bradley Thornton's pattern was crystal clear. A trail of conveniently timed disasters that always ended with him financially saved and someone else footing the bill. The second investigation Harrison mentioned, I'd bet my pension it was connected to those conveniently timed accidents and that maze of shell companies I'd overheard them discussing. And I'd bet my life savings that the Thornton family's sudden urgency to keep me out of their inner circle had everything to do with my professional background in recognizing insurance fraud. When I saw it, my daughter thought she was marrying into wealth and security, a family that could finally give her the sophisticated lifestyle she'd always dreamed of. What she didn't realize was that she was marrying into a federal crime, probably without even knowing it. But ignorance doesn't save you when the FBI starts connecting the dots. And it certainly wouldn't save her from the fallout of humiliating the one person who actually could have helped her through the legal storm she was walking straight into. "Ladies and gentlemen," the band leader said, tapping the microphone, "we have a special request for the mic from a member of the wedding party." The room slowly quieted. Conversations trailed off and faces turned toward the small stage. I walked to the center of the dance floor, feeling every pair of eyes track my movement. A mix of curiosity and confusion. Some were probably wondering who this woman in the off-the-rack dress was, and why she was interrupting their picture-perfect celebration. Melissa's face drained of color the moment she saw who was holding the microphone. She clutched Bradley's arm, her manicured nails biting into the fabric of his tuxedo. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this beautiful wedding," I began, my voice steady and clear through the speakers. "I'm Dorothy Williams, Melissa's mother." A ripple of murmurs moved through the room like a wave. Some of the Thorntons exchanged alarmed looks. They'd done such a thorough job erasing me that a few guests seemed genuinely shocked. To discover the bride even had a mother. "I have something very important to share tonight," I continued. "Especially with my daughter and her new family." That's when I saw it. Real fear flicker across Harrison's face for the first time all evening. He started toward me, probably hoping to grab the mic before I said another word. But it was already too late. The truth was coming out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "I've recently learned some fascinating information about the Thornton family business," I said evenly. "And I think everyone here deserves to know exactly what kind of people they're celebrating tonight." The room went utterly still. "You see," I said, holding up my phone so everyone could see, "I happened to come across some very interesting insurance documents earlier this evening. Documents that show a remarkable pattern of accidents and claims, all tied to one particular person." In this room, Bradley had gone gray, his face rigid, panic creeping through every line. Patricia clung to Harrison's arm like she was sinking in quicksand. Around us, guests whispered in disbelief, still piecing together what was happening. "I've spent 20 years investigating insurance fraud," I said, "so I know what these patterns mean. Multiple claims in short periods. Convenient timing right before major financial pressure. Accidents involving luxury items just when someone needs quick cash." I let the silence stretch. You could hear the soft clink of ice melting in untouched champagne glasses. Even the catering staff had frozen mid-step. "The kind of luxury items," I continued slowly, "that the Thorntons are known for. And the kind of financial pressures that come with maintaining a Beacon Hill mansion, a Nantucket estate, and the lifestyle required to move in circles like this." Every eye in the room was on me. "But here's what I found most interesting," I said, my tone sweet as honey and twice as lethal. "The documents I photographed tonight are already under active SEC investigation for insurance fraud." "Which explains perfectly," I added, turning toward Melissa, "why my daughter was so desperate to distance herself from a mother who can recognize financial crime the moment she sees it." Melissa's face crumpled, not with shame or regret, but with the sheer terror of someone who'd just realized they'd walked straight into a trap they never even saw coming. In that instant, she finally understood what kind of family she had married into, and more importantly, what her betrayal of me had truly cost her. "Bradley," Harrison hissed through clenched teeth. But I wasn't done. Not even close. "Oh, but the best part of this entire situation," I said, turning to face the sea of stunned faces staring back at me, "is that every single one of these fraudulent insurance claims was filed after Bradley proposed to my daughter, almost as if he needed a sudden influx of cash for a wedding, one that would cement his reputation in Boston society and give his family the perfect cover for their ongoing criminal activities." The photographers, both professional and guests, were going wild, cameras flashing to capture every horrified reaction, every second of this perfect collapse of lies and luxury. Tomorrow's society pages were going to make for fascinating reading. "So," I said, my voice ringing clearly across the ballroom, "I have a very special wedding gift for my daughter." The room went silent again. "My gift," I continued, holding up my phone so everyone could see, "is complete transparency about the family she's just legally tied herself to. I've already sent copies of these insurance fraud documents to the FBI, the SEC, and 3 major newspapers because that's what proper guidance looks like." I looked right at Melissa. "Sweetheart, teaching your children to stand up to bullies and criminals even when they wear $1,000 suits and hide behind old money and powerful friends, that's what love really means." That was the breaking point. Harrison lunged toward me, his confawade shattering completely, but he was too late. From the side doors, FBI agents in dark suits swept in, badges flashing under the chandeliers. "Harrison Thornton," the lead agent called out, voice firm and echoing through the chaos, "you're under arrest for insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and money laundering." The room exploded into panic. Guests screamed, stumbling over chairs and designer heels as agents moved efficiently through the chaos, reading rights and cuffing half the head table. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Boston's elite scattered, desperate to distance themselves from the people they'd been celebrating just minutes earlier. And in the middle of it all stood Melissa, still in her designer wedding gown, tears streaking her makeup. Watching her perfect day disintegrate around her like spun sugar in the rain, I walked over, Gently taking her trembling hands in mine, "Honey," I said softly, my voice warm despite everything. "When you're ready to come home, to people who actually love you for who you are, not what you can do for them, I'll be waiting." Then I picked up my purse, nodded to my sister Carol, who was watching the chaos with barely concealed satisfaction, and walked out of that country club with my head high and my dignity untouched. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting back. It's refusing to be erased by people who mistake love for weakness. And sometimes, it's making sure the truth lands exactly when it will hurt the people who deserve it the most. The next morning's headlines said it all. Boston society wedding turns into FBI sting operation, prominent family arrested for million-dollar insurance fraud. But the best part came 3 days later. There was a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, Melissa was standing there, still in her going-away outfit, eyes red and swollen, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking with real remorse. "I'm so sorry for everything. Can I please come home?" I opened my arms, and my daughter fell into them like she was 7 years old again. Some bridges can be rebuilt if both people are willing to do the work. It just takes honesty, forgiveness, and love that doesn't come with conditions attached. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've ever faced a betrayal or a hard choice of your own, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.